Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight, we're going to go over the 2023 BEDP Annual Report. We're going to talk a little bit about the background, also the 2023 Work Plan Report, the 2024 Proposed Work Plan, and then open for discussion. Okay. Thank you, council member. All right. Did we jump ahead? Next slide. There we go. And next slide, please. Thank you. For those in the audience or online, the Burien Business and Economic Development Partnership is a council advisory board formed to provide guidance on topics related to economic development in the city of Burien. There are 11 council appointed voting members, 3 non-voting ex officio members, 1 council representative to the BEDP. We have this amazing administrative staff that's provided by the city manager, and we have meetings twice a month. Next slide, please. The 2023 work plan items, we had the Economic Development Action Plan. Whereas the economic development staff will be managing the development of an economic development strategic plan. The BEDP assisted in planning efforts, RFP development, community outreach, and providing feedback on the plan as needed. We also explored a crime prevention through environmental design program, which is known as CEPTED. There was a business survey that went out to over 200 businesses in 2022, and those top 3 concerns were crime, nuisance behavior, and litter. We would also like to explore those potential options to implement the CEPTED tools and investments to help deter criminal behavior and mitigate the economic impacts. The third item in the work plan was the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. Council passed the ARPA implementation in September of 2022, which included $1.7 million in economic development programs. The BEDP worked with staff to provide feedback on the design and implementation as needed. Part of that, there were some grants, and of the grants that were distributed, the $5,000 grants, 67 of those were for women-owned businesses and 66 were for BIPOC-owned businesses. And again, I can't thank our staff enough. They do a tremendous job. They have actually kind of set the regional bar, and there are other cities that are trying to implement some of the things that we're doing in Burien. And I'm very proud to have these people in our court. Next slide, please. Some other areas of discussion we talked about, which was graffiti mitigation. That discussion was requested by the BEDP. We had multiple discussions around policies to deter graffiti. We looked at ordinances in other cities, outcomes from other states, and we also invited the Burien Police Department to share how graffiti is prosecuted currently. The BEDP made a recommendation to council that considers new policy language proposed by BEDP to deter ongoing issues with graffiti. A second item was the local minimum wage, which was requested by council. City Council directed staff in August of 23 to bring back recommendations for next steps to implement a new minimum wage in Burien. The staff worked with BEDP to schedule a roundtable discussion, which was held last fall, and invited guests from the businesses and the labor community. BEDP has made those recommendations to council regarding next steps for implementation of a new minimum wage. Next slide, please. The Economic Development Action Plan, Echo Northwest was chosen as the consultant to assist the BEDP in development of the action plan. We received presentations on economic data and conditions in Burien, feedback from community on opportunities and challenges, and an analysis from Echo Northwest on action items for consideration based on past city plans and preliminary priorities for further analysis. Work with the BEDP is still continuing this year with a planned recommendation in Q1 to prioritize those economic development actions for city council consideration and adoption. One of the events I attended personally was the Shape Your City event, which we had just shy of 100 people throughout the community attend in this very room. And it was really great to just see all the feedback that was provided, what's important to all members of the community. And we're still working with the consultant on defining what those priorities are. Next slide, please. So again, kind of touching on the CEPTED business program, we had a very powerful presentation from the Washington Retail Association and the Burien Police Department on those practices. Sergeant Henry McLaughlin, who was here earlier this evening, as well as Detective Mark Hayden, joined the BEDP and discussed those strategies that have either been or may be the most effective in our city. One of the things that was called out that was pretty prominent was lighting. We have a significant need to, which is significant to deter overnight criminal behavior. This could be very effective in alleyways. More enforcement for locking up dumpsters and removal of graffiti were also mentioned as important steps. The BET recommended to the city to identify potential options and costs for enhancing lighting in those targeted areas. And we're still continuing to have those conversations today. Next slide, please. Talking a little bit about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. So we discussed a preferred process and design considerations for programs to disperse $250,000 in funds for childcare business development. That is a huge area that we need to focus on for our city. We do not have enough providers. And also $250,000 in funding for workforce development. The BEDP approved a staff recommendation to pursue an RFP to solicit proposals for each funding source. And each committee will have 5 members of the BEDP present on it to kind of score applications and award the funding. We also discussed $120,000 in funds remaining from the original $200,000 allocated by City Council for the storefront repair grant program. Unfortunately, there is still a need for this in our city, as we still have businesses that are getting their windows broken or their doors damaged. So we had recommended that the City Council allocate $50,000 throughout the rest of the ARPA term, so that though any businesses that are that have that need still have those funds available to help. BEDP also discussed additional unspent economic ARPA funds and recommended options for use of those funds. Those are tentatively scheduled to be brought forward to council at an upcoming meeting. Next slide, please. It's no secret that we have graffiti in our city, as most municipalities do. We want to address those ongoing challenges in the primary and the commercial areas, and we discussed potential options to regulate the sale of spray paint cans in Burien. We had a couple of meetings where we reviewed the ordinances along with other communities in Washington State, hearing the feedback from the 2 biggest businesses in Burien that sell spray paint, and an update of current enforcement options from Burien Police Department. After discussion, We recommended that Burien implement the equivalent of the City of Sunnyside Municipal Code regarding graffiti mitigation, including aerosol spray, not my night to talk, including aerosol spray paint product access restrictions at retailers, restriction of sales of aerosol spray paint can to those only 18 and older, liability of legal guardian for graffiti damage, and also the City of Kent's code language regarding restrictions of graffiti tools to include spray paint cans, felt tip pens, and other etching tools. Next slide, please. Council also directed the city manager to conduct a study on minimum wage adopted by other cities and bring back a recommendation for a councilmanic process to establish a minimum wage in Burien. The staff worked with the BEDP to schedule a roundtable discussion, which included invited labor and business stakeholders and form an advisory recommendation to council. Following the minimum wage discussion on 9/22, the BEDP made recommendations which were relayed to council in October and as an ongoing discussion. Next slide, please. Other invited guests and presentations. Again, we had the Burien Police Department. They jumped in on CEPTED strategies. It was really great to hear multiple perspectives, both from the Washington Retail Association, as well as just our police department. Creative District Committee co-chairs and arts, looking at a Gateway Monument grant application, and then also Burke Consulting and Heartland presented findings on economic data through the comprehensive plan update. As a member of the BEDP, I was also representative on the 2044 plan. And one of my thoughts on just kind of that last bullet point with Burke is I know we have a brand new planning commission that is just diving in, and they've got a ton on their plate. My hope is that they are fully up to speed on the 2044, because since they do have so much on their plate, just making sure that, it's a lot to take in when you're trying to come up with a plan for 20 years for a city, and with a very fresh commission. Just want to make sure that they have all the support that they need. Next slide, please. 2024 work plan items. We have the Economic Development Action Plan. The BEDP is providing guidance and support to staff and council in implementing those priority action items, and we have a pretty healthy list. Broker, investor, and developer familiarization tours. BEDP is assisting staff with planning networking education events to bring together property owners, businesses, brokers, developers, and investors to help with deal making and investment attraction efforts. And then also the Gateway Monument redesign, which is of course pending council's authorization. The BEDP would collaborate with stakeholders, being the Creative District, Arts Commission, and certainly the community in planning for Gateway Monument sign at First Ave and 148th. And then of course, other topics as assigned by you. Next slide, please. So kind of our recommended joint BEDP and council meeting topic. The BEDP recommended the topic for the annual joint meeting with BEDP and council to be the discussion of the Economic Development Action Plan, and specifically prioritization of the work plan actions identified.
And thank you, Chair Davis. One note on, if we go back one slide on the recommended joint BEDP council meeting. So each year, council passed a resolution, I believe it was probably 18 months ago or roughly around there, that the BEDP and council meet once annually for a joint meeting to discuss a topic. The BEDP would propose a topic for that discussion. And so that was kind of one of the things we'd like to get out today. Not necessarily any requirement to approve the work plan for this year, although certainly any comments are welcome, but a thumbs up about this meeting topic. And specifically, the meeting topic would be the BDP and council sitting down together, talking about the prioritization of the action plan, which we're still moving forward with, so that everyone's on the same page and we can, the best world, we pick 3 to 5 items that we're all really super excited to work on and work on them together. So that would be one thing we'd like tonight, is just to at least get a thumbs up on that, so that we can work with city manager and mayor to plan that at a future, most likely council meeting. So it looks like we've got all thumbs up, at least here, and the mayor online. Thank you for that. And thank you, Chair Kim Davis, for presenting tonight. Kim's been a great leader and steadying influence with the BDP. So we're really grateful to have such a leader in the community with all her assets and knowledge on our commission. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments from council.
Councilmember Mata.
Thank you for that report. Got to serve on the BEDP as one of the council members, so I really enjoyed hearing different perspectives and really how the work gets done in our local community. You know, one of the conversations and complaints and concerns that has been brought to my attention here recently by several businesses is actually the parking. And I remember we did a parking study. I don't remember how long ago it was, because, you know, like, I feel like the older I get, you know, like now I can't tell whether it's been a week or months or years, but you know, there's been some change in businesses within the downtown core. And there was some complaints that in some of those, they're really not restaurant businesses, so it kind of blocks parking from restaurants at the time when they're doing their sales. There's been several articles that just came out how small businesses across the country are still recovering, and you know, this will be our second year out of COVID. So I think that it would be good to start figuring out whether, you know, do we have a problem or we don't? Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just, for some background of that, I think we did the last study, community development did a parking study middle of COVID. Unfortunately, that's where they were required to do it. So I'm not sure how much we learned necessarily from that. I think the biggest challenge that we heard was that there wasn't active enforcement of parking regulations going on. And so it wasn't generating the turnover of folks parking on the 152nd, as an example, all day. So I think, you know, we've been working to figure out, there was a couple case laws where we weren't able to chalk tires at one point to enforce it. So we were going to hire on a license plate reader, I believe, to fix that problem. And now we've gone back to, I think we're able to enforce regarding chalking again. So I think that's the first step, is really to hopefully ramp up our enforcement at some point here, so that we can start turning over those parking spaces more. Certainly parking is very expensive to build. And so we have a limited supply, although most of our, I will say, most of our downtown-wide occupancy surveys of parking says that we're roughly at 60 to 70% typically. And they recommend that additional actions to be taken when you get closer to 80+%, because that's when you're kind of full up. So I think probably another occupancy study is due here in the next year, probably, I think, from when we did the last one. But I do think additional enforcement is probably sooner in the pipeline to address some of those issues.
Thank you.
Councilmember Aki.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation of the incredible work that you've done in 2023 and what you're looking forward to in the future. I have been meeting with businesses over the last, well, actually just a couple of days. We unfortunately have had some additional crime on 152nd. One of our favorite little places that Mike goes to get his cigarettes out on the corner. They're on 8th and 152nd. Had their counter smashed in. And they have a picture of the young teenager that did it. And it's very concerning. He continually has this kind of crime going on, even in the middle of the day. It's not all just like lighting. So I'm really wanting to, you know, push forward the support that we need for our businesses to be able to feel safe, and addressing whatever we can on those crime pieces. I'm glad that we have, you know, the storefront repair grants and things like that. This one wasn't actually his windows or door, it was inside the store. But I think I, you know, it's important for us to continue to provide that level of support that we can for the businesses to feel safe to operate. This particular crime that occurred, we happened upon it just after it had happened, and there were patrons that were inside when it happened, and it was very frightening for everybody involved. So I really do care about the businesses themselves, the customers, and the people that are coming in, and that we continue to work to be able to support our businesses as they deal with the crime that's occurring within the downtown core and be able to help that. I also am excited to see the Gateway Monument redesign, particularly with the thoughts around consistency of Burien, like of our logos or our designs that are consistent throughout the city, so that it feels like a cohesive city when people are coming in through the different areas, you know, whether you're on First and 152nd, or First and 148th, or 160th, or even further up north, and blending that in too as we, you know, work to incorporate Boulevard Park. So I look forward to that as well. And again, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing. And I look forward to the amazing work that I know you're going to do in 2024 as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Sarah.
Thank you, Chair Davis, for that. That was a really good presentation, and I learned a lot about just what the day-to-day life of the BEDP is. So thank you for that. I had one question that came from your conversation, which is what can we do to support the Planning Commission with the 2044? And then the other question had to do, it's kind of similar to Councilmember Akey's question about the Gateway. I've always wondered what the history of the location on the Gateway was, and whether is that for people arriving here from 518, or how, why that corner, that place. But I like the comments about just it being having a consistent look for all the entrance points into Burien.
Thank you, Councilmember Sarah. As far as just making sure that the Planning Commission was up to speed, again, I know they have probably a very heavy lift being a brand new commission, you know, all of them. And, you know, they already have a pretty heavy load of everything that they're doing just on the day-to-day. And obviously being a part of the 2044 commission for a year plus, you know, I know that there's, you know, probably a lot of knowledge transfer that they may not have missed or may not be up to speed. And just want to make sure that that they have the support of the 2044 commission, because by the time most of them were actually kind of coming on and getting up to speed, a lot of that was actually already wrapping up. And so I just want to make sure that there's enough knowledge transfer that happens from the 2044 commission that goes to the Planning Commission, so that they have a well-rounded source of information.
And I'll just touch on the monument sign. So certainly I think that street where folks are coming off the freeway and into Burien's the most traveled area of one of our kind of main roads coming into town. It was also just an opportunity with the developer at the time who was willing to do something nice for the frontage there. Although talking to the developer and the council at both of them thought that the other ones, I think, really liked the design. And I think both were looking for a little bit more. From what we hear from businesses also, whether that's dealerships, whether that's senior home facilities, that is the first kind of the face of Burien for a lot of folks that are coming in to either find a place for their parents to live or to buy a car or other. I think they don't feel that it really reflects Burien. Specifically, I think we heard in a lot of our interviews earlier about the creative element of the community, the diversity of the community, and whether that really says what we want it to say about Burien when people come into town. And we'll share more I think probably in the next month here about that grant, but it was actually a partnership with the Creative District. And that area is in the Creative District or just outside of it. So it allowed the Creative District to apply for funds for that monument sign. And then we'll come to council to authorize whether that's a use you guys want to pursue and potentially use some ARPA funds as a grant match for that. But I think it's a really exciting way to promote the Creative District, which we want to find some momentum behind that effort, and a way to make that first entrance for folks who haven't been to Burien before really reflect the passion, the diversity, the talent that's in the community.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff and Commissioner. As someone who has served on both the Planning Commission, I know that you remember those times. It is a heavy lift. It is a lot of analytical information. So I thank you for bringing up that support for that new commission. A couple of questions, and then just clarity on one thing. The sign RFP that was approved by the BDP, that was approved, but it hasn't started. Am I right? Like the RFP has not gone out.
No, we need to come to council and ask for some potential matching funds. And so there was just ducks to go in a row where the Creative District had to get the grant. We wanted to get approval from BDP. Both of those have now happened in the last month. And so now the last step is come forward to council for that request.
I appreciate that, thanks. And I think, I'm glad because I think I would support and highly suggest to add to the fellow council members, Aki and Moore, who suggested about conformity within the sign, is that we definitely look to invest some of that signage in the other entryways to the city, particularly the north side of town. There's still a sign that says you're in White Center when you go by the McDonald's on First Avenue or off Ambo. I mean, not First Avenue here. There's also, I think, maybe a small 2-foot sign that says you're now entering Burien on 4th Avenue, and maybe one on First coming off unincorporated White Center. I think having a sense of belonging after that area has been annexed since 2010, it would be a big statement to say, hey, look, it's not just the entryway off to 518, it's actually this area too. And I think the same would go for the south end. And then I just wanted to ask, I pulled up the survey, business survey, great job in 2022 business survey. And it just showed, again, what you repeated, that the feedback from community is crime, homelessness. And then I wanted to touch on that based also on another topic that was recommended there, which was the recommendations on the minimum wage discussion that we have ongoing. We've gotten a lot of comment that business owners want us to be thoughtful and look at the progress and how close we are to COVID. So I just want to ask, when did we start the initial study with BDP, when we had a consultant come and explain to us the differences? And how many times have we maybe deferred enacting minimum wage since we started this discussion at the BDP?
The commission, the BDP report was 2021, 2022, because I believe when that work occurred. And then that report was delivered to council. And then the BDP didn't have further direction from council after that point until it was more recently brought up. So when the city manager received direction in August, that's where BDP took it up again, did its work over September, October, delivered recommendations again to council.
So it's been since 2021, give or take, that we've had discussions and presentations and consultants and now brought back to discuss. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? And I guess just a reminder, we had a vote on minimum wage last year, but it was voted down by council. So there was a motion that was then voted down at the end of last year. So we're bringing it back as a way to discuss it again. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We're moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Presentation